Okay, today we're going to talk about Corelli's Trio Sonata, the fourth movement that we've been studying, and how we get the stylistic features. Now, when we do stylistic features, we're not interested in describing everything as you would in the compare and contrast questions, where you have two musical elements that you need to compare and contrast. Instead, you're giving a broad outline of what is a stylistic feature in those elements in the time period we're talking. So with the Corelli, we're talking the Baroque period. Now, I've put up here, I made through Poplet, a great app you should get for your iPads or iPhones or iPod Touches. And I made this graph that shows you the musical elements that you should be following and in what order we're going to look at these. Now, you'll notice that context or performance circumstances is missing, because this isn't going to be necessarily something they ask for, although you should know it, but it's more important, these musical elements, to describe the stylistic features. Context doesn't really describe a stylistic feature. Context is the history, and so on and so forth. So, the first thing is, where do we start first? Well, that's quite simple. We start with forces. Forces is simply type of ensemble and the range and combinations when we're talking stylistic features. In the Corelli, we have two violins, a cello, and chamber organ. Most everything is in the middle of each instrumental range, so that means that it is written in an idiomatic fashion. There's shared melody with the two violins and the cello, but the cello also will be playing the continuo line with the chamber organ, who is filling in the chords. So we start first with forces, and then we move on to, we figure out what sort of ensemble range and combinations of instruments are being used, and once we figure those out, that gives us some stylistic features of the forces used in the Baroque period. Where do we go next? Well, quite simply, go around the clock here to form and structure. Form and structure is really super important because different time periods favor different forms and structure. Form is a word descriptor. Structure is a letter descriptor. You can't forget that. It's very important that you put both down in your answer. In the Corelli, it's binary form, A, B. You have to write A, B, and binary form to show them that you know what binary form is. So don't forget, after forces, we do go to form and structure. And form and structure, form is a word descriptor, structure is a letter descriptor. And you need to put both down on your exam to get full credit for that question. And in the Corelli, it's binary form, A, B. Now, so where do we go now? Simply to tonality. Tonality, really simply put, is how each section of a given piece relates to each other harmonically. And so that means in the Corelli, what we have is binary form. We first of all have to decide whether we have functional or non-functional tonality. Functional tonality means the chords all make sense and the key centers and all are related to each other. Well, they certainly are in the Corelli and the Baroque period in general, so it's functional tonality. Okay, the A section goes from the tonic to the dominant key, and the B section basically goes from the dominant to the tonic key. And there's passing modulations throughout the B section. That's kind of important. Now you need to name the keys as well. I can't put everything on this video, so you're going to have to do a little bit of studying and get those keys down of what the tonic and dominant keys are, really of all your pieces. So you go next to tonality after form and structure. Tonality does make each section of the form and structure different. Okay, so we don't keep the same key throughout each section. And we need to decide whether it's functional and non-functional and what the key relationships are. Tonic to dominant and dominant to tonic are very basic, fundamental key relationships. So it's very, very functional tonality. Harmony is next, okay? And the reason why harmony is very important is because it's governed by tonality, and that's why we do it next. Harmony, this is where we're talking now about the chords and cadences. Tonality, we're talking big brush strokes of sections. Now the chords and cadences that are used, all right? And we're talking common cadences and everything at this point in time. We also have to be, like tonality, decide whether something's functional or non-functional. We got functional and non-functional harmony. The harmony in the Corelli and in all of the Baroque period is very functional. They use the primary chords. You got to remember that. Primary chords, 1, 4, and 5, in root position and in first inversion throughout the piece. They also use common cadences, such as the perfect cadence, which is 5-1. And they use this at the end of each section, at the end of the A section, and certainly at the end of the piece, and in other points throughout each section. So harmony is important. It relates to tonality, but it's more like a more fine-tuning, because we're talking about the use of chords and cadences, not the broad brushstrokes that tonality had. And you got to remember, this all helps with the form and structure, and the primary chords are the big chords that are used here in harmony. Now, so melody follows harmony. That is correct. And we go to melody. Melody is kind of neat. It's kind of the most complex, probably, of all the musical elements. But what we're looking for is melodic devices. Now, melodic devices are all kinds of things, but in the Corelli, it's motivic. And he uses inverted melody. I believe that happens at the beginning of the B section, with the motifs being played basically the other way around. And he uses imitation and repeated melody and transposed melody and canon. So he uses a lot of different melodic devices here. And that's really, really important. Melody is everything. It's what we listen to in a piece, and harmony underpins it, and the big broad brushstroke of tonality, which defines each section in the form and structure of a piece. So we look at melodic devices, and we see that the Corelli uses quite a few, and it's mainly motivic. That's the big thing you got to remember here. And then, finally, we're going to be looking at texture, because melody and harmony create texture. So we're looking up there at texture, and what kind of textures do we have? Well, we got monophonic, polyphonic, homophonic, heterophony, all those things that you studied in years past. But the overall texture of the piece and any other interesting textural features. Now, in the Baroque period, the big overriding texture, which is in this piece, is counterpoint with polyphony. The Baroque period is all about counterpoint and polyphony. And this is the overriding texture with the Corelli. The harmony and the melody make texture. And in the Baroque period, a stylistic feature of texture is counterpoint with polyphony. It's that simple. Texture is actually probably the simplest of all the musical elements to learn and understand. After texture, we need to look at where we're going to go from this point. Now, those 6 musical elements, forces, form and structure, tonality, harmony, melody, and texture, are the most important in finding the stylistic features of the Baroque period, or of any given piece. What makes that a piece in that period of music? Well, there's also rhythm and meter and performance directions, and both are very important as well. And so we're going to go now, and we're going to, after we do these big 6 that I call them, we now move on to the 7th one, which will be rhythm and meter, and then performance directions. Now, don't forget the big 6 come first. Then we do the rhythm and meter and performance directions last. Rhythm and meter is kind of neat. you got to talk about the meter first. I know we don't call it meter and rhythm, although probably we should, but it's rhythm and meter, but we talk about meter first. So let's have a look at rhythm and meter. What's about the meter? Well, the meter is going to be either simple, compound, duple, triple, quadruple time, and it will have regular or irregular time signs and the rhythmic devices. Simple time is 2/4, 3/4, 4/4. Compound time is 6/8, 9/8, 12/8. 3/8 is simple time. It's the odd one out, so don't forget that. Okay, so you got to look at the Corelli and see what time it's in to decide whether it's simple, compound, duple, triple, or quadruple time. Now, in the Corelli, it's in compound duple time. It's in 6/8 time. And its rhythmic devices is straight quaver rhythms. It does have hemiolas in the B section, and it has syncopation throughout. This is quite common in Baroque music. A lot of Baroque music uses hemiolas and syncopation. So don't forget your rhythm and meter. You start with the meter first, describing simple compound time and its meter and the rhythmic devices and if there's any irregular time signatures. And in the Corelli, it's compound duple, straight quaver rhythms, hemiola, and syncopations is mainly what is used there for rhythmic devices. And these are very much stylistic features of the Baroque period. Performance directions is our next one. Now this is a very interesting one when it comes to the Baroque period, because performance directions, what we're looking for is simply dynamic markings as well as articulation and tempo indications. Well, in the Baroque period, all three were missing. There were no dynamic markings, there is no articulation noted, and there's no tempo indication. Basically, what was used in all three cases was the use of common practice of the time. So in dynamics, it would be known where to do terrace dynamics a lot and everything. And in articulation, basically long notes were short, short notes were long. That meant that crotchets were played short, like with a staccato, and quavers and shorter notes were usually slurred. Now, tempo indications didn't exist. They just knew what the tempo was according to common practice, according to the movement. And what we have here is it's the fourth movement of a four-movement work, and those sonatas went slow, fast, slow, fast. So it is a fast tempo. Okay, so performance directions, definitely the way it's set up with no real performance directions, just relying on common practice, and you should note what that common practice is basically a stylistic feature of Baroque period chamber music, which the Corelli is. All right, so we've just now completed all of our musical elements, figuring out what the stylistic features of each one were. Like I said in the beginning, you're not going in great detail. You're not going to be naming out bar numbers or comparing and contrasting with anything. You're just telling what features are in the music and general locations, like whether it's in the A section or the B section. Good idea on a lot of pieces, everything happens in the B section. So that's what you want to kind of remember there. All right, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this Corelli Stylistic Features video presentation.